Hey everyone, welcome back to another Spotlight Conversation. Happy Friday. Welcome to our second Spotlight Conversation. Today I'm speaking with Rachel. And Rachel, are you in here? Hey
Hey,
friend.
how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
How are you? How's your Friday going?
I'm good, girl. Trying to get this homework done.
I feel you. I hear you.
Um,
All right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name's Sadiyo. I use the pronoun she, her, hers, and I am a coordinator for the CJL this year at Hamlin University. And today we're talking to Rachel, who's an organizer and a good friend of mine. So Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
sure. My name is Rachel. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior at Hamlin, studying education and social studies. Yeah. Anything else?
No, anything else you want to share about yourself? Or we can just jump right in.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay, word. So the first question I have for you is, what is some of the work you're doing in your community, whether it's, recently or in the past? Like, what is the organizing that you do?
So I've been pretty active youth organizer since like high school, so like 2014. I did some different things within my high school, some community organizations that I worked with, and some youth organizations, um, just kind of sporadically, but pretty consistently. Um, and then more recently, there's been a lot going on, especially this
Right.
summer. So my most recent thing that I've been working on is People's Protection Coalition, which we got started this summer
Yes.
in June, or technically the end of May, but pretty much June. And the work we've been doing there has primarily been focused on kind of um, getting supplies to the houseless community, and the community in general, with a primary focus on South Minneapolis. Yeah, and just working on mutual aid with that.
And how did that come about? Like, how did the idea come to you? How did you organize through this?
Yeah, so actually, um, got started. I think you were there too. That day we were at Fifth Precinct, not the one on Lake Street, the one towards Uptown. When we were occupying that space, and it was like the second day over there, and we had built up that medic
Oh,
zone.
yeah. Yes. I
Yep,
do remember that.
yep. And the idea behind that was to try and have a safe zone where people could receive medical care, or like emergency first aid and things like that, and the medics could operate without the threat of projectiles, because that was one of the big issues where medics were getting
For
hurt
sure.
when they were trying to take care of people who were getting hurt and shot with projectiles and other things. And so we had built up and fortified that zone to block off from projectiles and kind of keep as a safe zone. Like that was going to be a
Right.
safe zone. And then it got pushed. We got pushed back pretty quickly that evening, and the cops came out really full force.
They were not playing.
They were not playing with us. They
No.
had the lasers out and everything. They brought the real guns that day.
Yep.
Well, they were not playing, and they pushed us back really quickly, and they did not recognize that as a safe zone, and they just raided the whole thing. And we lost all our supplies.
We lost a lot of supplies that day, and we spent so much time gathering the supplies. Like, they wasted no time to like destroy our stuff. Absolutely.
Exactly. That was crazy. But so that was kind of the moment, or like the next day, I was reflecting on like what had happened, and someone, I was at Floyd Square the next day, and someone had came up to me and recognized me from the day before when I had been on the loudspeaker trying to move people around and get it built up. And someone was like, oh yeah, I saw you yesterday, blah blah blah. And I was talking to her, and she was like, yeah, I told her what happened, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
it all kind of fell apart, and she was like, so what are you gonna do next? And I was like,
Mm.
what am I gonna do next? And she's like, so then that got me thinking. I was like, you know, we could make like a mobile medic unit so that
Mm.
we could be mobile with it and it wouldn't be so easily just taken over like that.
Right. Right.
So that was the original plan, and then it kind of evolved into like kind of trying to create like a people's ambulance or a people's
Mm-hmm.
emergency vehicle
Mm-hmm.
that would be independent of the police, and that was the original goal and like mission of PPC. Um, but by the time we were able to actually get a vehicle, the protests had kind of died down, and
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't really like emergency first aid wasn't really the biggest necessity. And then
Mm-hmm.
also really had to consider like the capacity to which we can like operate as an
Yeah.
emergency medical vehicle with
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of young people with no
Right.
medical training, you know. So it just got really complicated to try and keep it at that. So we reevaluated to see what we could actually kind of do and
Mm-hmm.
impact, and what needs were still there. And the biggest thing we saw at the time was, you know, the encampments were popping up around the parks, because the parks were at that point acting as sanctuaries. Of course, now they're evicting people almost
Right.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
But so there was a lot of different areas of need within the houseless community that we could, you know, tangibly service. So that was kind of became our primary goal. And then we do work on other things as well. It
Mm-hmm.
just kind of depends on what the needs of the community are at the
And
time.
what is the current need today? Because I know you said like protests died down and like first aid wasn't as, you know, needed as it was when protests were at its height. So like, what are y'all working on right now? Because I know your tagline is like you guys shift to community needs. So.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So currently we're still pretty working, we're still working pretty heavily with the houseless community, just because we've built those ties and those
Absolutely.
relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We've been hosting a few drives, um, both to kind of get supplies for the house community, but also just the community in general as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the last drive we had, actually, we kind of opened up to be like a people's store in a way, so people could just shop the supplies that we had, whatever they needed,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. We did a actual distribution today.
Oh wow.
So yeah,
Yes.
it's been a little less uh, what's the word? A little less big things and a lot more like small distributions,
Mm-hmm.
like here and there, and kind of staggering them between members, because school started and people have gotten more busy. So we've been kind of
Right.
doing like, you know, more in shifts rather than all the gang all together, everybody
Mm-hmm.
caravanning to distribute.
Yeah.
So we've been working on that, and we want to also continue with that, especially as the cold weather
Mm-hmm.
continues, because girl, it snowed today. Like
It
what?
did. I saw that and I was like, what's going on?
You know, so that with the cold weather coming, you know, people are
Mm-hmm.
gonna need warm clothes and other things to keep warm, because it gets really dangerous in Minnesota in the winter.
It gets
So
super
that's
cold.
gonna be kind of our primary focus for a little while, just because it is right now one of the most vulnerable communities.
Mm-hmm.
We're also we had been looking into kind of trying to get things, get resources for distance learning, but
Mm-hmm.
we had um, we had some meetings, and the need for what we could do wasn't really there. So we're kind of reassessing and to see if that changes. So yeah, right now we're still kind of focusing on the houseless community, and yeah,
Yeah.
trying to prepare for winter.
Yeah, which is such a prevalent issue, especially in the Twin Cities. Like we see so much homelessness happening. So how can people elevate and support your work? Because I know there are people on here who probably want to get involved or donate. So plug us in on how we can support your work.
Absolutely. So you can always follow us on Instagram, which is People's Protection Coalition. No underscores or spaces or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then we launched a Patreon with our, if you saw the City Pages article, we launched
Yes.
a Patreon. So that allows us to kind of bring in a monthly income,
Mm-hmm.
because we run completely off of donations. So when those run out, it kind of impacts our ability to supply and distribute.
Absolutely.
But with a more monthly concrete flow of income, we're able to do more regular work. So that's been really good. You can access that either through the link in our bio on our Instagram or at peoplesprotectioncoalition.org.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just that. And then we also on that page have a link that has all the other donation information. So if anybody wanted to make like a one-time donation, you could do
Mm-hmm.
that through Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, etc.
Word. And I'll make sure to put your Instagram when I save this live and upload it so people can get involved. All right. So our themes at Center for Justice this year is health, justice, and the law. How do you think mutual aid kind of fits into that? I know there's definitely a correlation between health and mutual aid, but for justice and law, how do you think that encapsulates?
Right. So mutual aid, especially, so like you said with health, mutual aid, like when we're able to get people their basic necessities, you know, that decreases the risk for other prolonged health issues down the line, right?
Absolutely.
So we are able to distribute like first aid kits and things like that. We can specifically target issues of health. In terms of justice and law, it's a little more abstract, but mutual aid basically is just kind of working to reallocate and redistribute the resources of a community. And it's a reciprocal effort. So when we uphold and uplift members of our community, right, we are able to, let me think this through. So like issues of justice, I feel like, or injustice, I would rather say, come about, I feel like, when we are, when we stand together as a community, and I feel like we saw that this summer most of all. When we stand
100%.
together as a community, okay, injustice, there ain't no place for her.
No.
There is no place
No.
for her.
No.
Right? So as we continue to kind of foster and feed mutual aid and growing as a community and really coming together, I feel like there's just
I think she froze.
injustice, right? Because we see that they're not sustainable. And if we continue to there's a saying that I really like that is I believe you grow what you feed. So if we feed
That's so
these,
powerful.
if we feed these systems that have nothing, do nothing for us and don't support our most vulnerable members of our community, we feed that system and it grows. But if we feed mutual aid, if we feed grassroots efforts to reestablish new systems and building up of the community, that's what grows. And from that injustice, there's just no place. And we have to reevaluate what we want out of our justice system, out of the laws, what law we might have to reevaluate, you know, whether the law is just in itself, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because I think mutual aid is a form of like collective care. It's communal care, you know, and it's a form of paradigm shifting to me because it leads to so much transformation. So, like you said, if our laws, like what we feed is what grows. So, if we feed our communities sustainable resources, that's ultimately what grows. I'm so glad you brought that. That's so important to highlight.
Yeah, so like that's one of the biggest things when you think about like mutual aid. It's growing systems that are more sustainable. That's why it's so different from charity. And charity is more of it's a weird power dynamic. It's kind of less prolonged. Mutual aid is a reciprocal, we are looking out for each other as a community. And that's really important, especially in times of high distress and struggle.
Right. And what's so important is you're engaging the community as well that you're serving.
Exactly.
Which charities don't really do. They kind of have that disconnect between who they're serving and their purpose. And mutual aid just encapsulates all that, like you said.
Right. The thing about charity, it's not an inherently bad thing, but it does come with a kind of power dynamic of like,
it does.
I'm the giver and in the position of power, and you're the one being given to, so you're in a position of lack, which we don't like to like envision it that way.
Yeah, because it doesn't serve it.
It's a hierarchy.
Yeah. Essentially, basically, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to switch gears and talk about the election because we are in election season. How do you think, what does this upcoming election mean to you and your community?
I think it's going to be a really impactful election either way it goes. To be honest, I think really no matter where it goes, there's going to be a lot that comes out of it. There's just going to be a lot that comes out. I'm just looking toward November like, okay, it's going to be really unpredictable.
Do you think it could go one way or the other?
What was that?
Do you think it could go one way or the other, or are you kind of just like?
I think either way it goes, it's just going to be a catalyst because they're so polarized like viewpoints on either side that I don't know. 2020 has just been there's no words.
It's beyond me.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like this is just like the icing on the cake, the election to maybe possibly end all elections. And we'll see what comes of that, but it's gonna be
interesting.
Yeah. That's really the only word that you can describe, I feel like, is interesting. It would be very interesting. But in all honesty, the election hasn't been, at least personally to me, the most pivotal thing because the election in and of itself won't spur any deep systemic change, and that's really what we need to see in order for things like police brutality to be actually deeply impacted, right? So I don't know, for instance, I believe it was Audre Lorde who said the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house, right? And so thinking about that, just voting, it's not going to be enough to affect deep systemic change of these deeply rooted systems of white supremacy that are just ingrained into even the fabric of society. So the election in and of itself is not, at least to me, going to be at least impactful in the sense of deep systemic change, but I am looking forward to the ways that the people will come together in any event surrounding the results of the election and the events that ensue afterward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think voting is a tool that we need to use and utilize, but it's definitely not going to eradicate social injustices. Like, we have to start talking about what causes these issues to exist in the first place, and not just put all of our faith in voting. Like you said, it's not going to change anything.
Correct. Because truthfully, both sides of the ballot don't really advocate for that deep systemic change that we need, right? We need to be we need police abolition. We need abolition of these systems that breed white supremacy and white supremacist thought, and that's not going to come about, at least in this election. But there are other ways that we can do that, one of which being mutual aid.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to be mobilizing all year long and not just every 4 years when, you know, the presidential elections come up.
Exactly.
Because that's serving nobody. So.
Right. And
it's total sense.
Waiting quietly obviously hasn't done anything either. So.
Yeah, that part. That part. All right. So my final question to you is, like, what is your call to action? What do you want people to take away from this live? What do you want people to get engaged with? Like, what's your call to action, basically?
So my call to action, I would say, if voting is important to you, as we kind of discussed, like, it's a really important tool, then vote. But don't let that be all that you do. Especially moving forward in the upcoming months. As we said, it's going to be very unpredictable. And, you know, who knows what could happen. No one was expecting the summer to be a powder keg like that.
Nobody.
But it was. And so within your capacity, because I also want to stress that not everybody's activism or not everybody's action, I guess, looks the same, because we don't all have the same capacities. So I want to say, within the acknowledgement of your capacity and what you're capable of, just push yourself to do more and actually research into what you can do to affect change on a more concrete and tangible level than just a symbolic vote, right? That's one thing, but it should not be the end all be all. When we are talking about deep systemic change. Honestly, plugging local grassroots organizations that are already on the ground. There's a lot, and not even just PPC, but there's a lot within Minneapolis and St. Paul, and obviously other areas as well. But there's a lot of people already on the ground doing that work. That you can support in a lot of ways, right? So that's one thing I will say that I would find more impactful.
Right. That's so important. I hope you all caught that. Make sure you vote if it's possible for you. But thank you, Rachel, for having this conversation with me. Like, to get to speak to you about the work that you're doing is something I'm grateful for. So thank you for making time. For everyone else, I just want to take the time to plug in our October 30th event that's happening. It's on community research, health, and trauma. That's happening from 12 to 2:30, excuse me. And the link is in our bio if you want to register. So check that out. Make sure you're also following CJL for our updates and announcements. These spotlight conversations happen every week. So make sure you're tuned in next Thursday to hear from another guest. So yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Rachel. Take care. Have a good weekend.